Let's talk some sports, baby.
And remember, make tomorrow better than today and make today better than yesterday. And you know what we gonna do. We gonna holler at you until next time, baby.
Let's move over to the NBA for some coaching and GM news. The Philadelphia 76ers, not long after hiring Doc Rivers, got their GM. Rockets GM Daryl Morey, fresh off stepping down from Houston, was aggressively courted by the Sixers. Morey pairs up with Rivers to sort out their superstar duo situation and try to get them back in the East contention. Also in the East, new head coach Steve Nash for the Nets made waves, picking up Mike Dantoni as his top assistant. Two have a history, but the hiring was a little surprising. So, Jay, who's likely to have more success in this next chapter?
I think both have really good chances of having success because they go to teams who already have, at least on paper, star duos. Philadelphia, we know whether or not they fit to the highest degree of success. That is still that remains to be seen with the duo of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and then of course Brooklyn last season pairing Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. We're going to get really our first true look at that this season with the return of KD. But I think the better hire. I think Daryl Morey is the better hire because it makes a little bit more sense to me. Now up front, I think there's going to have to be some discussions of the just the hierarchy and who the actual decision maker is. Morey taking the president of basketball operations role. And I just saw this morning that Elton Brand, before Morey got hired, I believe he was given a contract extension, at least that's what's being reported. The general manager who in his first season last season, he was not very good. And then, of course, you have Doc Rivers coming in there. There's a lot of personalities and a lot of, big name guys with, resumes to stack up against each other. Doc Rivers is a championship coach, even though he hadn't been able to get it done recently. Elton Brand, he carries weight from his time as a player, and Daryl Morey, couldn't get the championship, couldn't get to the NBA Finals, but boy, he threw everything in the kitchen sink at trying to make an appearance with all the different strategies and whether it's small ball with analytics, all these different type of things. I think the one decision that has to be made very quickly, and maybe if you look at a shortened season, maybe you wait until 2021. But I think first and foremost for Daryl Morey, you got to look at do we continue forward with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons together? And I think you have to make that decision fairly quickly because at some point, and I'm already done with it. I think we've seen enough to know I don't think this will work. In terms of winning an NBA title. So I think you have to decide which one you'd rather build around for the future. And I think no matter which one you trade, I think you can get a pretty significant haul for either one. And I think you can get if you can get a proven guy back, let's say for example, and I don't know if you can do this, but what if Houston is ready to perhaps go in a different direction? And maybe could you get James Harden? Could you do a Ben Simmons, James Harden swap? I think if you can do that, I think Daryl Morey would be thrilled for that. You pair James Harden and Joel Embiid together, and I think you can have something very interesting. But if you don't want to go that route, maybe Daryl Morey's thinking a different way. Maybe he wants to get rid of Joel Embiid, and then Ben Simmons could be his quote-unquote Russell Westbrook, and you just load up shooters around him. Maybe you go that way. But I think depending on what Daryl Morey wants to do, and we know, he has a history of, trying a whole lot of different outside-the-box ideas. But if he wants to continue along the lines of, three-point shooting, free throws, no mid-range, no post-up, it's going to be interesting. In that regards, you would think maybe Embiid would go because Embiid, first and foremost, is a post player. And we know typically in a Daryl Morey, if Daryl Morey is associated with a franchise, well, the post-up game doesn't exist. And then, you're going to have to recreate this roster because last year Philadelphia went against the grain and they went with we were looking at, Embiid, Al Horford, Ben Simmons. They got just outside of the Lakers. I mean, they were the team that accumulated the most size, but they didn't have the shooting. When you look at, you let go of JJ Redick. Obviously we know Jimmy Butler went to Miami. That was one of their best scorers. So that's my question with Daryl Morey. I think Daryl Morey has the basketball acumen, and we've just seen him do it in Houston. And regardless of how they move, I think they're going to be compelling, and they're going to score the basketball. But just to speak on Brooklyn, fairly quickly, this just, I think me and Drake were discussing a little bit earlier. This just looks a little bit strange to how they're structuring things for KD and Kyrie Irving. First of all, you hire a guy who, to my mind, doesn't have any coaching experience at all in Steve Nash. And then you want to, I guess his top assistant is going to be his former head coach, and Mike Dantoni, who has been a head coach for, the past 15 plus years, and fairly successful, doesn't have the NBA title. And then you get another assistant who has no coaching experience, and Amari Stoudemire. You combine these three guys together, and the immediate question I have off the cuff is, are they gonna play defense? Are they gonna invest any energy and effort into playing defense? And that's where I think the last assistant may be the most important hire at all, and that's Ime Udoka, who they did, interestingly enough, they got him from the Philadelphia 76ers. So I think he could be the guy that could be most interesting to watch and will have the greatest impact on how they defend. But in terms of who will be more successful, I think immediately up front it could be Mike D'Antoni and Steve Nash with Brooklyn. But when it's all said and done, and just based on the position that Morey has, in comparison to D'Antoni, I think Morey will have the most success when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think Jay hit most of the wickets when it comes to this question. It's just very hard for me to see D'Antoni, having more success than Morey, because when I look at it, I say which one of these guys are doing jobs that we know them for, which one of these guys are doing jobs closely to what they was doing. That'll be Daryl Morey in this situation. Running the team, that's what he does. And like I say, for all the negatives I gave him for Houston not getting over the hump, he still had them as a successful winning franchise when it all came down to it. I don't think they had many losing seasons when he was there, if they had any. And then just like Jay said about Mike D'Antoni, listen, here's the deal. It's just this looking like a whole crock pot of a mixture of soup. I mean, listen, like you said, first-year coach Steve Nash got a little experience, so I'm gonna put some respect on the fact that he was a special assistant with the Phoenix Suns, and then Golden State 1 and 2, and then your first assistant is Mike D'Antoni, which many thought he was going to be a head coach again for some franchise, but I think he risked it for the biscuit and came up short, and he didn't get a head coaching job, so now he's a first assistant. Then you got Amari Stoudemire, one of those guys that's going from that whole player to coach transition, kind of like what Jason Kidd did, kind of like what Derek Fisher did, one of those transitions. And like Jay mentioned, you got the guy from the 76ers. So you got two coaches that's coming that's been their seasoned coaches, but the head coach is a rookie coach. And then I don't even know what you're doing with Stoudemire. I don't know, like that's a graduate assistant program or something. I don't even know what that is. Then when you put all that, you mix all that together, and then you put that with the fact that, okay, now you're talking about KD and Kyrie, two of the most outspoken, rebel-like, we going against the norm players. You got, I heard an interview with Kyrie and KD actually on the podcast saying, we don't even need a coach. So most days we can coach the team. Okay. That's not it. Like, even if LeBron said something like that, I'm looking at him side-eye, even though that could possibly be like a thing, like because his IQ is so high. Not saying those guys not smart, not basketball savvy, their IQs are not high, but it's like, y'all don't even want to do your own job and you want to do someone else's. Like, what are we talking about here? So I don't understand when Kyrie say I can coach the team Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and KD can coach them Tuesday and Thursdays, or vice versa. It's a whole lot of nonsense. And now you're on top of that, you bring a first year coach in, and it just doesn't sound like it's gonna make a whole lot of sense to me. I could totally be wrong, but when I mix all that stuff, sometimes when you cook certain foods, if you put the wrong ingredient, you mess up the whole thing. And it's just like, we got a whole lot going on. Let's see if that works. To Jay's point with Daryl Morey, I think it will be a change in his philosophy. I don't know if that whole philosophy he had at Houston, the analytics, and we're gonna take the big guy out of the game and da 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 da. I don't think that's gonna be the same. I think Doc Rivers gonna put his foot down and say, enough's enough. I play defense. We're gonna coach defense. Here's the deal. Now, I would not mind, them trading for James Harden. That'll be a lot for the 76ers to take on in terms of the contract. And then who do you give up for all that? Ben Simmons, for sure. He's out the door at that point. But you're going to have to give Houston some guys that matter, probably coming off the bench, some of your young guys that was producing for you last year that came, lesser known guys. Old Shake Milton, guys like that probably you will have to give up, because this is James Harden. We talking about one of the best scorers in the game. And what do you give up is what I would like to see with Philadelphia. What kind of package do they come up for? Because this is James Harden, you know what I mean? But if you can make it happen, I'm on board. Like, you go and get James Harden. If Houston is listening, you go and get him. That's just point blank, period. Give up what you got to give up outside of Embiid, but get him. Because James Harden, if you ask me, he seems to be able to play with a big man. And I don't think it was his fault that Capella got traded. I don't think it was his fault that Dwight Howard had an attitude. But from what I've seen, James Harden can play with a big man. Guy as good as Embiid, I got to think you're going to get some success out of that. So, as far as the question goes, I'm with Jay. I'm gonna go with Daryl Morey. I think he got more tools in his toolbox to be successful. I just don't understand what D'Antoni's role is, like mentor, confidant. I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of weird that he's going to be a first assistant after being the head coach for so many consecutive years. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with Daryl Morey with the success for the next chapter.
And I say we'll jump back in right quick on Brooklyn. I think the biggest wild card in all of that is still remains, even with all the the coaching moves and everything. It's still Kevin Durant's health. Kevin Durant comes back and is any similar to the player he once was the last time we saw him. That can be a sort of Band-Aid that covers up all this uncertainty in the coaching staff. Now, if he's not, then that's where some of those potential issues could come to light.
It's very true. And I guess I have a little different take on it. I think I like the D'Antoni hire more than you guys do. And the reason is, the way I see it is this. I think D'Antoni is getting to that point. He's 69, almost 70. He's been coaching. He's been a head coach since, 2004, 2005? I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, he was coaching the Phoenix Suns a while ago. So he might be at the point where he's like, look, I've had a couple runs. I've had this responsibility for so long. Maybe he's ready to change gears a little bit. And maybe he's got a guy in Steve Nash that we know they go back a long way. Maybe he's ready to go ahead and maybe take that mentor role on, maybe, change gears a little bit and kind of get rid of some of the responsibility and see a guy that he coached for so long, kind of take the next step. And I think that if you're Steve Nash, it's a really good hire because we know that he has a tremendous basketball IQ. He knows the game inside and out. But if you're a leader, whether you're a CEO or the president or anything in between, you surround yourself with smart people, right? Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And I don't know if it's like pure smarts, but D'Antoni is going to bring a boatload of experience that he doesn't have, that Stoudemire doesn't have, and a lot of the other guys on the staff doesn't have. And I think that one thing we might be overlooking a little bit is D'Antoni's experience in dealing with personalities. I mean, he's coached James Harden. He had some time with Kobe, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo, Howard. I mean, he's coached some of the biggest names in basketball. And what we always talk about with coaches and managing personalities. What are the Nets have? They got some freaking personalities on that team. And, the first time this season that KD and Kyrie start acting up, Steve Nash on his own may not know quite how to handle that situation, but D'Antoni may say, hey, man, this is how you need to take the situation. This is how you need to approach it with these guys, how to smooth this over so we get back on track. I think that wealth of experience is going to be very good for Nash, and it could potentially be that missing piece that the Nets wouldn't have otherwise. So I like it, and I'm viewing it as, D'Antoni's ready to change gears a little bit and not he bricked on all the other coaching vacancies, and this is what he settled for. Yes, if you take it like that, then it does look a little more suspicious, but it is what it is there. But I think it's going to be fun. I mean, these guys all know each other. They go back. They're not just a bunch of random guys thrown together in a box. I mean, they all have a long history together. So, maybe it works out better than we expect. But I think it'll be fun. But I think, again, the Nets, like Jay's last point real quick there, you mentioned that if KD comes back and he's healthy, which I think KD will. I think that ACL, the injuries he had, or I'm sorry, the Achilles, if there's ever a player that could come back and still be good with his ability to just be giant, tall, and be able to shoot anywhere on the floor, that's going to mean that he doesn't need that explosiveness as much as some other players would need it to get by in his game. And the Nets are pretty good already, and then you add these two in there in the mix. If you can get that working at all, they're going to win a lot of basketball games. I mean, they are. And if they're winning basketball games, this is all going to be hunky dory, and they're all going to feel good. And you can see this rolling along at a nice rate. I think that the chance of the success is fairly high. So I like it more than maybe you guys do, but I think Morey's got a good chance in Philadelphia too. I really wonder how that looks with the two superstars and the difference of opinion. Does Doc Rivers think the same way that he does, and Elton Brand does? I mean, are all those minds thinking the same? If they all wrote down a vote who's going to get traded or are they going to trade at all, they may come up with 3 different answers. And then how do you work that out in the organization? So I don't know.
That goes back to my main point up front with that is like who's in charge. Like you got Daryl, they bring in Daryl Morey to be the basketball president of operations, but you still have Elton Brand and Doc Rivers to contend with, who they bring their own cachet to the table, so they're gonna have to get on the same page as far as that. But I do really like the point you made about Mike Dantoni. If your belief is true that he's ready to, in some ways, take his foot off the gas, take a different role. He's been a head coach for a long time. It's got to be wearing on him. All those seasons of coming up, just short in a lot of cases. This could probably be the best job he could ask for. You get one of your former players where you had some really successful seasons, and the guy was he won back-to-back MVPs off of you. He's the head coach, but you got to believe Mike D'Antoni is going to have his ear, and it's not going to be one of those cases where Steve Nash, he's going to show some deference to Mike D'Antoni just out of probably natural respect. But at the same time, Steve Nash has the head coaching title, and if things go wrong, he's going to be the one getting all the smoke from the press, not Mike Dantoni.
Yeah, you could make that same argument. You're talking about who's the leader in the room. I mean, is that going to be the same problem in Brooklyn? Again, is it going to be, is Steve Nash really the guy to listen to, or is it like, yeah, we all know Mike's going to run the show? How does that work? So this is, I think both moves are going to be really interesting going into the season.